What's going on, Dragons? Happy Black Friday, and welcome to episode 18 of the ErCast, your weekly Friday night Magic pre-show. I'm your co-host Corey, and with me this week is the man whose planeswalker spark is the friends he met along the way, Cole.
Hey Corey, how's it going?
It's going good, and I hope everybody. So we're recording this pre-Thanksgiving, but I hope everybody listening had a wonderful Thanksgiving. Time with friends, time with family. But today we're back in the thick of it with a little magic action.
Well, I'll tell you, I know we're recording this pre-Thanksgiving, but I'm thankful for all the magic I'm going to be playing on this long weekend. Woo!
Did you got a 4-day or?
Now I actually have to go into work on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, but only for a couple hours.
No weekend.
But we'll make it work.
This week, we are going to be talking about the Power 9 of Magic. Now, the Power 9 dates all the way back from the origins of Magic. They actually all came out from Alpha. But what we thought about is, listen, you're not going to your LGS. You're not sitting down with somebody dropping a Black Lotus or a Ancestral Recall or any of those things. And if they are, rob them in the parking lot.
Well, and it's
Go
worth
ahead.
stating that they're not going to be playing a Black Lotus because some of the Power 9 are they're not even playable. They're actually banned in our favorite format.
That's true. So what we thought we would do this week is we're going to sit back and reassess what the Commander Power 9 are. So some of them, I will say, I made a list, Cole made a list separately. Some of them we clearly and definitively agreed upon, and some of which we had differing ideas. Now, I won't say we disagreed, but I will say that my list and your list don't exactly match.
But they're similar. I think it's what 5 out of 9 the same. So you and I are 5/9 the exact same person. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. So we're slightly above half in agreement, which I think statistically means we get along better than 99% of people that sit down at Magic tables.
Oh, well, we're playing at different tables then, because mine it's 100%.
All right, guys. So to hop into it, so first off, I think, especially for newer Magic players and things like that, let's tackle the elephant in the room. What is the Power 9? Where'd it come from? And why does it have this distinction of being the most powerful cards?
Yeah, so the Power 9 are an extremely strong group of 9 cards that were definitively a step ahead of everything else in its category. They're kind of the best at what they do, and it's likely that unless power creep, means that some of these are going to get functional reprints in different cards, that these are going to remain kind of the hallmarks for power in higher level Magic gameplay. There's some similarities between these 3 cards, like the 9 cards, that all kind of demonstrate with what power and Magic is, and that's like, power through resource advantage, whether that's drawing cards or generating mana, or in some cases taking an extra turn. If you're able to accumulate these resources faster than your opponents, you're typically coming out ahead. And a lot of these cards are 0 mana or 1 or 2 mana for a really fast acceleration in one of those departments.
Yeah, what I think is really interesting is it shows sort of how Magic's progressed through the years, because when you look at the Power 9, and we'll go through them here in a second, it's a real quick list to kind of go through, but when you look at them, the main thing that stands out that's different than Commander as you and I know it in 2023, there's no creatures on the list. Commander is inherently a creature-heavy format. None of the Power 9 are creatures.
That's a great point. A lot of these are, 0 mana artifacts or sorceries, an instance. And so you don't even have any enchantments. You don't have any. I mean, obviously, planeswalkers weren't invented yet. You don't have any battles. Battles weren't invented yet. Just kidding.
Is there like, we'll rip off the spoiler. Is there a battle in our Power 9 list?
Oh, I think you'll have to wait until the end of this video. Go ahead and like and subscribe. I'm just kidding. But
Lock yourself in
no,
now.
we have no battles in this video.
Just a narrow whiff by a few thousand cards. But so real quick, so we can just kind of summarize the Power Nine. So yes, they did come out. I believe they all came out in alpha. If not in alpha, maybe some popular in beta or unlimited. But I believe they're all alpha centric from 1993.
That's right.
Um, so the nine cards, just so we're clear on what you talked about for the resource advantage. So we've got Ancestral Recall, which is just straight up draw three cards.
1 mana, draw 3 cards, or force opponent to draw 3 cards. So you can actually kill
Which
somebody
you're
with
always
this.
doing. You
It's a
could
kill
in
spell.
the pre-mill games, you could do it. Black Lotus, which we will say is probably the most recognizable card in all of Magic. I almost said it was like the crown jewel of the Power Nine, but it is definitely the face card, I think, of the Power Nine.
Yeah, I mean it's the face card for expensive trading cards in general. It's
Mhm.
I'm curious. I'm gonna pull it up what it's going at right now, but I imagine we're gonna have to hold on to our seats.
I know what is it? The Post Malone just got, or I say just, but got one a couple years ago. Was it for $850,000, $900,000, somewhere in there? But that was, of course, like a artist proof, signed by the original illustrator. Whole shebang. Probably like a PSA 9.5 or something.
Yeah, I mean I do see a record of sale for 540,000 on here.
Mm.
Yeah, these cards it's a pretty expensive card, and it's for good reason. I mean
And
it's fairly strong.
yeah, and it's just sacrifice it, 3 mana of any color. Pretty straightforward. It's Dark Ritual, Cole. We've had Dark Ritual
Well, and admittedly,
for
it's
0.
important to say that it's 3 mana of any one color. So we were talking earlier about functional reprints, but you'll see that on our later on our list we have a card that is a functional reprint of the Black Lotus. A lot of these effects have been added to other cards in the future, but they've been changed or modified to be a little bit more balanced in different ways.
Mhm. The next up is we'll just call it one big chunk. It's the 5 Moxen. So there's Emerald, Jet, Pearl, Ruby, and Sapphire, one for each color. I mean, it's self-explanatory. If you know what Black Lotus does, you can assume what the Moxen do, which is 0 mana, sacrifice for X color, whichever one it applies, but it's just one as opposed to three.
Now, do you have to sacrifice it?
Is it?
I,
Or is it a
uh,
tap?
I don't know. Let me.
It shows you though how long it's been. Let's see. We're gonna go Mox. I'll go Pearl. So you're gonna sacrifice. No, it is just a tap. You're right. Even better. Even better. You just tap it and you get the mana of your color. Next
Kind
up
of
we have Time Twister. Go ahead.
well, kind of funny here, but on Card Kingdom, it says pro tip: the mock cycle is incredibly powerful, essentially allowing you to cheat on the 1 land per turn rule. These artifacts allow you to ramp out powerful spells ahead of the curve and are incredibly rare and collectible. Mock Sapphire is currently banned in Commander and Legacy and restricted in Vintage, and that'll get you. You can get one of these for $5,039. There's an excellent
They actually
condition
have
one.
it for sale
Yeah,
on Card Kingdom.
Card Kingdom is one available.
What?
So by the time this is recording, Corey will already have purchased this for me as a
Yeah, yeah.
Thanksgiving present.
It's in cart right now, actually. Um, and then we've got Time Twister and Time Walk. Now, they both say time in their name, which would make you think they're extra turn spells, but spoiler alert, only one is.
And that one
Well,
is
do
going
you
to be
know which one?
probably the most powerful extra turn spell ever conceived. It's 2 mana, 1 and a blue for Time Walk, which is take an extra turn after this one. The art is like 2 skeletons kind of walking towards what looks like the Stonehenge. And this
Mhm.
card is so unbelievably strong that it had to be banned in our format because otherwise it just looks so abusable. Am I right, Corey?
Yeah, it's definitely abusable. Now, what's funny is there is one of them that is not banned, and that is Time Twister. Did you know that? Time
I
Twister is
did.
not banned in Commander?
I did know that.
So Time Twister is 2 and a blue for a sorcery. Each player shuffles his or her hand and graveyard into the library and then draws 7 cards. So it's sort of like a game reset without actually resetting the board or resetting life totals. Uh, that's why it's called Time Twister, because you're resetting back to turn 1 essentially.
Well, and
Which one
ideally
to you?
you've pumped your whole hand onto the battlefield and you're able to
Right.
play this before anybody else has gotten advantage out of it, and then you refill your hand and everybody else who's mulliganed for
Yeah,
this hand is gone.
all of these things are symmetry based, right? Like any card, you want to break the symmetry. So yes, if you've got a 0 hand, all your gases in the graveyard or on the field, somebody else has a full grip, then yeah, Time Twister away. To you, what is the most powerful power 9 like that could hold up today?
Well, I mean, it's all these cards hold up today. Black Lotus is obviously going to be it's strong in a vacuum, and Commander, it's able to get you a really fast turn one. If you have an expensive Commander, you're probably going to be able to get it out as though you had a Jeweled Lotus. So I think that one is already kind of covered because we've seen it in history. It's pretty strong, but I would go with
Mm.
Time Walk because I love abusing sorceries that go to your graveyard after they resolve. That sounds like a fun time to me.
Yeah, I think Time Walk is probably the most busted one. And I think the other ones you can kind of work around with reprints that are out there. I mean, how many cards really conservatively do you think are out there that are everyone goes, "Oh, that's ancestral recall for blank strategy," where it's, "Oh, it draws you one card, but if you've got, blank cards in the graveyard, it draws you 3 cards," or Treasure Cruise where it draws you 3 cards, but you can delve so
Or
from an 8 mana down to an ancestral recall 1 blue.
and that's a great point. I mean, Ancestral Recall, one mana for 3 cards, and one blue mana is probably worth more than
Mm.
one mana of any other color. But 1 mana for 3 cards is extremely efficient. You're looking at
Mm.
Harmonize in green draws 3 cards for the price of 4 green mana, so you're less than 1 card per mana right there. So this is just out of the gate going to be really strong in every deck. Whereas Time Walk, you might not be able to take advantage of that extra turn, because at the end of the day, an extra turn isn't like that strong unless you have kind of a game plan to make use out of it.
Mm. Okay. So our goal here today is we've fast forwarded 30 years from the original Power 9. Uh Even if they haven't been power crept out, they've definitely been price crept out of the format, which I think is a fair statement. So we want to go through today. If you were to walk in, what is the like into any LGS, or you were to walk into a Command Fest or a MagicCon or anything like that, what is the Power 9 of our format? Now, it will differ between Modern and Legacy and Pauper and all these other things, but within the confines of Commander, Cole and I have come up with 9 apiece. Like he said, we sat down and wrote our list separately. 5 of them overlap. We agreed on 5 of them without consulting each other. And then we had 4 differences. So we're gonna go through the 5 that we both agreed on, like 100% slam dunk. This is our Power 9. We'll go through those. Then we're gonna look at the ones that we might have differed on. And then I think you guys in the comments can, prove to him that I'm correct. Obviously, objectively, that I'm the correct list maker.
Well, and before you get all judgy on our list, I do want to also preface this by saying that this is the Commander Power 9, not the, CEDH or, kind of more competitive Power 9, where
Right.
some of these cards probably overlap with what would be on that list, but we're obviously ignoring some cards that are, really strong in a dedicated combo deck, but this is more
Mhm.
you're more likely to see these cards at a casual table that is a little more than casual, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, these aren't like your Gitaxian probes and all those, spell twines and all that kind of stuff. Well, first up, I think we talked about how Black Lotus was the face of the Power Nine. I think this is the face of our Power Nine and the face of the format. And I mean, we're gonna see if you guys can guess it. I'm sure you already have, without any other information besides it being the face card of Commander. 1 mana, taps for colorless, colorless. It's an artifact, and it's in every precon you have ever seen, and that is Soul Ring.
If you like it, then you should have put a ring on it.
So real quick, so we are going to take a couple stats from EDH Rec, referring to the quantity of decks they appear in, stuff like that. Now, these stats are going to be based off of net decking, so sometimes you will see numbers that seem a little off. So we'll put a little asterisk on that when we see ones that look a little odd. But I do think this is possibly an accurate number for this one. So in all decks that Soul Ring is available in, which is
Which is
all
all of
decks
them.
because it's colorless, 88% of all decks that are built, at least built online, Soul Ring appears. It's $1.99, Cole, which is the lowest cost of any card on our list.
Well, like you said, it's in every single precon. So if you've ever purchased a precon, you're going to have this card in your collection somewhere. I'm a little surprised to see that it's only in 88% of decks because I know this card is kind of joked about as being one of the, admittedly so, it is one of the more powerful ramp artifacts. You're going mana positive. Everybody loves to look for this in their opening hand, and it often creates a lot of enemies right out the bat, but it'll get you that 5-drop commander a lot sooner. So I have only have one deck that I don't run Soul Ring in, and so my personal statistics are about 99% of my decks have the Soul Ring
So
in
you have
them.
100 decks, right?
No, 100
100
decks.
decks, that's how it gets there.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I think the only reason it's maybe at 88% is due to conscious choices, because we can have a whole conversation about unfair gameplay and stuff like that, where if you're the one person who gets a Soul Ring out and nobody else does, you definitely have a early game tilt on that whole pod.
Well, and likewise, if you and I have seen statistics that actually the playing a Soul Ring on turn one has like a lower win rate than not playing it until like a later turn. Like playing that
Mhm.
turn one Soul Ring is more likely to make an enemy of you and get you
Sure.
killed, like focused by the table. But I also think it feels equally as bad to be the one person who doesndon't have a Soul Ring on a on a
There's
three
three.
person Soul Ring start. Oh man, it's like you might as well just pack your deck up and leave. I don't want to play. I don't want to play 2 mana behind every turn. That's crazy. Let me tutor for it, please.
I think you're right. If you're the one person who plays it, for sure, there's somebody in the other three players in your pod is gonna tell you, "Oh, so and so's the threat. Oh, Cole's the threat. Cole's popping off." And God forbid, by the way, that your hand goes, I play a land, tap it, Soul Ring, tap it, Arcane Signet, tap it. Like at
Ruin
the
crab.
at that point, yeah, Ruin Crab or Wayfarer's Bauble or some other 1 mana BS. Like if you do that, I think your win rate on your turn one win rate has got to be like 80%, and then your turn two win rate is like 3% because everybody at the table is like, well, time to destroy them. Time to target them into the ground.
Right. Now, the
Oh,
reason this is on our list is because I think pretty easy to see. A large portion of the cards that are on the original Power Nine are directly related to mana advantage. They're 0-drop cards that generate more mana than the mana cost, which is really easy when it's 0. But this is one of the
mhm,
few cards that is going to go mana positive that isn't banned slash several $1,000s. But the
sure.
next one on our list takes the cake as I think being a pretty well, not the most expensive card on our list, but up there in the top 9, that's for sure. And this is
Yeah.
the it's the power, the recreation of Black Lotus, but a little bit more balanced for tabletop gameplay. This is the Jeweled Lotus. 0 mana, taps and adds 3 mana of any one color after being sacrificed. But that mana can only be used to cast your commander. Now,
Mhm.
Corey, do you have a Jeweled Lotus?
I do not have a jeweled lotus, actually, but I
Well,
do have several lotus petals, which are the next
ah,
tier underneath that. Um, but jeweled lotus, listen, if you have like any 3 color or 3 cost mono color commander, this is a slam dunk card. My wife runs Ayara, First of Lock Thwain, and in her case, literally that commander is black, black, black. So if you have a jeweled lotus, turn one commander right there, and then
you
you
don't
still
even
have
need a
your
land.
land drop. Yeah, and then you've got your land drop to play your Soul Ring.
So you
See,
could also
you're already
play a 4 color or a 4 CMC commander, but there is an
right.
interesting restriction here that after you get above 3 colors, you're kind of running out of turn one viability for Jeweled Lotus. Sure, it's a powerful card, but it does kind of fall
Mhm.
off later in the game, being that it is a ritual that only helps you cast your commander. And what I
Sure.
mean by that in terms of the colors is like if you have a 4 mana blue black commander, you can play an island, you can play a Jeweled Lotus and tap the Jeweled Lotus for 3 black and tap your blue, and there you go. You're all good to go. You have your commander out.
Mhm.
But if you have a 3 color commander, so say something like Animar, the Soul of the Elements, who's green, red, blue, you're not going to be able to use Jeweled Lotus to cast that because assuming your first land is like a mountain, you play the Jeweled Lotus, 3 mana of one color. That doesn't really help you. It's going to mana burn if you're playing it against a Yarlock deck. So if anything, this card is
Yeah.
pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean, now there's the other aspect to it too, which is late game, right? So early game, everybody's rushing to get their commander out. So that's when this card super shines.
Right.
Similarity we talked about turn one Soul Ring. Nobody's ever bragging about their turn 10, turn 12 Soul Ring, even though it's just statistically as likely. But Jeweled Lotus, yeah, in the early game, getting out that commander is huge. Late game, you might actually want something more like a Mana Geyser or a Dark Ritual or one of those kind of effects because you can utilize it towards other cards. Like you could take those 3 mana from your Dark Ritual and spend them as colorless on another card, spend them as 3 black on another card.
Or you can take
You just
your
have more flexibility.
400,000 red mana from your mana geysers and pump that into a crackle of power and just win the game on the spot. Jeweled Lotus doesn't win you the
Now,
game.
I will say this. So one of the negatives I feel on Soul Ring is the fact, and I'm sure you've heard this too, which is when you come to deck building, that Soul Ring limits creativity because it's such an auto include at its price value that you sit there and go, all right, I'm gonna slot Soul Ring in, I'm gonna slot Arcane Signet in, and now look, I only have 99 or 98 card spaces left. With
Yeah.
Jeweled Lotus, if it wasn't at this price point, by the way, it is currently averaging $85. So if it was not at that price point, I think this would be a third version of that in specific decks.
Yeah, because the thing is here is that Soul Ring is pretty unless you're playing a commander like Ayara that's 3 black pips. The
Mhm.
mana just doesn't really help you from Soul Ring in that scenario. In a similar way that the Jeweled Lotus does, it doesn't help you in that same or in a similar scenario to that one. But the difference with Soul Ring is that 2 mana is going to go into any of your other spells. Whereas Jeweled Lotus has one use and one use only to help cast your commander. Later in the game, it's pretty much just going to cover your command tax. Like if after a
Mhm.
certain point, this card might as well just be a dark ritual that can't be funneled into other resources. So I do think that it is. If it was a little bit cheaper, you'd probably see it more. But I don't think
Mhm.
it's going in every deck.
Yeah, I mean, think about it like this. So Lotus Petal is essentially the same thing, except it just gives you 1 mana as opposed to 3. and Lotus Petal is like a $20 card, somewhere in there, $20-$30 card. So having the 3 is a huge power jump, but and it reflects in the fact that it's $85. We talked about, hey, Soul Ring's gonna be the cheapest card we see today. And now don't think we're bashing on Jeweled Lotus because it is a slam dunk power 9. We're just talking about gradations within the power level.
Right.
But I mean, you're gonna take if Jeweled Lotus today was a $20 card. I'm not even asking for a $2 Soul Ring price. If it was a $20 card, I think you see this card in 75% of decks.
Oh, well, yeah, I come from the perspective that, Soul Ring, although necessary because everybody else has a Soul Ring, is like it
Mhm.
doesn't really create for super fun games.
Yeah.
So I kind of stand by that. Maybe getting that turn 2 or 3 Toxrill out shouldn't be that way for a reason. So I hope that
Mhm.
this card stays at this price point to kind of nullify those games. Although they are sometimes fun, especially when everybody gets a cool turn 1 pop off, it just, I think, leads to bad feelings more often than not.
Do you think so basically your argument is you bring Soul Ring because it's sort of like everybody else is bringing guns to the showdown, so why shouldn't I?
Yeah, I mean and not like you're able to rely on you drawing the Soul Ring the same time that everybody else does, but
Sure, sure.
unfortunately, it's just a call sign of our format that if you're wanting to get those keep up, you might need that Soul Ring. So I like I said earlier, I do have one deck that doesn't have it, but it's only because it doesn't have any artifacts. Otherwise, I'd realistically run it in there too.
Mhm. Next up, we are going to look at our third third in a row artifact that taps for mana. So we're trying to whip through a couple of these because they're so ubiquitously good that we want to get to the juicier stuff. So the next one we have is Mana Crypt. And guess what? It costs 0 mana and it taps for 2 colorless. So I know what you're thinking. Better Soul Ring. Soul Ring costs 1, this costs 0. Now it does have one downside, which is at the beginning of your upkeep, you flip a coin. If you lose the flip, you take 3 damage.
Yeah,
So there's like a little bit of a downside.
3 damage adds up, and also there's ways to city on fire or things that are going to impact that and
Mm.
kill you even faster. So
If
there are
somebody city on fires themselves with or Mana Crypt, Mana Crypt loss.
it's a sad day, but I've seen similar events happen. I've seen people make copies of Mana Crypt and forget that now they're taking potentially 6 damage each turn or on their upkeep.
Mhm.
It adds up. I mean, 3 damage. That's you get 13 turns down until you're at 1 life. So hopefully you haven't taken any damage before then. This is a great card. It's a 1 mana difference from Soul Ring, but it's I've seen it sputter out just as often as I've seen it pop off.
Yeah, I mean, this one comes out to statistics, right? So in theory, you are going to lose every other flip, like in a pure zero, outside influence statistical rate.
Right.
But there's always that chance that hey, you have that game where you flipped tails 5 times in a row and kept calling heads, and you just started just imploding with damage. And sometimes you have the exact opposite, where suddenly you're on a hot streak, you're in the casino, you're tapping it for 2 mana, you're flipping coins, you
Uh
got
huh.
Kark the Thumbless as your commander, and you're flipping again, and you're just going to town.
Yeah, I think that it's a feast or famine card. I mean, if you're worried about 13 turns, I mean, the game's over in 8 to 10 turns most times, anyways. But I do not have a Mana Crypt. I was hoping to get one. I was hoping to get a Jeweled Lotus in Commander's Masters. Didn't happen. I was hoping to get a Mana Crypt in Lost Caverns of Ixalan. Didn't happen. So it's just another nice mana
another
rock that I might never own.
another another letdown in the long string of letdowns you've had cracking packs. Um, Also, just to give you an idea, so again, going by 1 mana difference, Mana Crypt jumps all the way up to $160. So This now, I will say this is not the most expensive card we're going to look at today, but as far as cards you're going to interact with or see on a consistent basis, this might as well be the most expensive card we're going to talk about today.
Agreed. It's averaging 159. I'm not sure what the lost caverns of Ixalan printings are gonna, if they're gonna fluctuate that number, but maybe
Mhm.
after some more, boxes get open, we'll start to see that.
Yeah, you have to see where. Usually, you have to see where those things are going to fluctuate because when a new set comes out, a couple things happen, right? Like the whatever the hot new card is that got spoiled by everybody and all, like the command zone played it in game nights and this and this and this. Those things get pumped up very high and then tend to kind of taper off into the next set because the hype wears off. Mana Crypt might be one of those things where it sits at $160 right now and then maybe as more and more open up because we all know how good it is that it starts to maybe it drops to 120, 130, something like that. But these are those cards that like inevitably creep back up if you don't reprint them. Like if Soul Ring did not get pumped out in every precon, that would be a 40, $50 card. Easy.
Um, I mean, admittedly, Soul Ring was like an alpha card. It used to be very expensive until Commander
Mhm.
kind of was the one format that you could play it. It was responsible for a lot of the, the draw to Commander back before it was a Magic endorsed game, and likewise, it's being reprinted as gave everybody a little bit of access to what would have been 100% considered the Power Nine.
Mhm.
Now, I have a special card next. It's a card that I personally like because I love to be pretty bothersome during a Magic game. Corey, you might know that. I love asking people things on their turn and kind of like extending game time. But this card is kind of notorious for that. Now we're out, as far as I'm concerned, we're out of the fast mana artifact sections of our personal
Sure.
lists, and that
Which was
stands true.
a third, by the way.
But it just goes to show you how strong mana advantage can be. Now, something a
Mhm.
little bit, what? Yeah, sure, you have mana, but what are you gonna do with it unless you have cards in your hand to cast? And how better to refill your hand than by drawing a card every time an opponent casts a spell, unless they pay the one. Now, certainly you've heard that phrase a million times before. Corey, take us home. What's the card I'm talking about?
We're talking Esper Sentinel. No, we're talking Ristic Study. Two and a blue enchantment. Just a man in the library. But whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may draw a card unless that player pays the one. Which is what you're going to use all that fast mana for, because of course, in a game of Commander, all three other players that are not playing Ristic Study, they responsibly pay their taxes each and every time, and they speed tap their lands to pay that one before the other person even has the chance to ask if they're
I
going to pay
wish
the
we were
one.
living in the same world, Corey, because I feel like I'm the only person who's ever paying the one. I'm putting in all the work, and then this guy's drawing all the cards. It's a
What's
team effort.
funny is how many times you sit at a table and like you can have that conversation outside of a game, like, oh yeah, man, hey, strategically the best thing to do is pay the one. Hey, I get it. Yeah, we're all gonna pay the one, we're gonna shut them down, we're gonna do this, and then it hits the board, it passes to you. You play a spell, you're a good person, you pay the one. It passes to player three. They're a good person, they pay the one. Then it passes to player four, who of course is running a spell slinger cantrip style deck. And they're like, no, but I need every mana accessible to me possible. I refuse to pay. I could need it next. I could this. Da 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 da. And the next
Well, and
thing you know, they've cast
admittedly,
10 spells.
you want this, if you play this too early and then somebody else is going for one of those fast mana starts where they're playing like a
Mhm.
soul ring into an arcane signet into a ruin crab, and then also I have a mana crypt. It's like they're playing four cards there without any capacity to pay the mana, and so they're trading their
Mhm.
advantage for and giving you card advantage into it. So this can be a very painful card that punishes people for doing, those crazy explosive early turns when they're not going to be able to pay the one.
Yeah, that's the same thing with all I think a lot of the fast mana too, which is if you get it out on an early turn, the impact is gonna be much greater than a later turn. And inevitably, because this is the way it always happens, when they play Rhystic Study, one of the first cards they end up drawing off their deck is Reliquary Tower. So they never have to discard a card again.
How convenient for them.
I'm pretty sure they put them they put them side by side in their deck, and then when they shuffle, those two cards just never get separated. So they kind of float the deck together. So they get one and two, and like
Personally,
just a
when I
double
play, I
whammy.
just keep the Reliquary Tower in the same sleeve as the Rhystic Study. So I just pull the
It's
Reliquary
the
Tower out
same.
when nobody's looking, and I sleeve it up again when nobody's looking, and then I put it on the table when nobody's looking. And magically, I'm finding it like that works for me every game.
See, that sounds like a lot of effort. What I do is I just go Bandit Keith style, where I keep like 3 or 4 reliquary towers up my sleeve, and I flip them out as needed.
Reliquaries on the left, Rhystic Studies on the right, and I'm good for 4 games.
Hmm.
Now, this card is also the first card on our list that's has a color identity. It's a blue card.
Sure.
So that does kind of change our statistics for looking at how many decks this is in. Obviously, the percentage of the decks that can contain Soul Ring, Jeweled Lotus, or Mana Crypt are all of the all possible decks because they're artifacts, they're colorless. Heuristic Study is in a whopping 29% of all decks that can play blue. So that includes, your mono blue, your 2 colors, your 3 colors, your 4 colors, your 5 color decks. What it does not include is your colorless decks and then anything that does not contain blue.
Yeah. Now, this brings up an interesting question I wanted to ask you. So, when you look at the original Power 9, there's there's 3 cards that have a color identity. And then there's 6 that well, 6 they do technically have a color identity for commander purposes, but you've got 6 colorless artifacts that then have color identity because of their text within them. And then the 3 spells are all blue. Now, do you think that that's just a nature of like is blue the most powerful color? I guess is what I'm getting at, or do you think
Oh,
that's just a nature of them having access to the most powerful spells?
well, I think it's safe to say that in Magic's conception, blue got a lot of love, and I think there's a kind
Mhm.
of a lot of evidence to support that. Where the other colors being considerably weaker until they were able to kind of catch up. And so a lot of these
Mhm.
blue cards, I can't even imagine how it would have felt playing Magic in 1993. I'm dropping a 5 mana 1/1 and my man over here is drawn 9 cards on his turn for 3 mana. So
Mhm.
blue,
Yeah,
trash color, but just kidding. It's a fun color
well, I
too.
think that's an impact that Commander has too, because when you look at Commander, because creatures and all like land ramp and all these things that blue doesn't do as well are equally as important. It kind of balances itself in that sense. Whereas if we were back to just draw cards and sling spells, I think blue is still top dog.
I have one last note about Rhystic Study. I do feel like it's pretty strong. I mean, obviously it's 3 mana. It's an enchantment. It can be slow. People can pay the one. So like, oh well, why is it on our list? But also, not only does it provide you card advantage, but it also provides mana advantage. Card advantage can be seen like as you drawing cards, but also if your opponents are discarding cards,
Mhm.
that can be considered, in essence, card advantage. Rhystic
Sure.
Study, if your opponents are paying the one, they are preventing themselves from forwarding their game plan to maximum efficiency. And so you're thusly getting kind of like tempo, you're getting a mana advantage, you're getting a lot more than just the card. And you get the opportunity to say, did you pay the one? Every turn, every cast.
Which is in and of itself its own advantage, right? Being obnoxious at the table is like its own card advantage in and of itself. But yeah, you're absolutely right. So when it comes to card advantage, I think it's a concept that a lot of people, especially newer players, is very hard to grasp So it's not just I draw cards, look how thick my hand is. But yes, if you cause someone else to discard a card, that's card advantage. Any of those things where you're up on a resource. So you are getting card advantage in this in the sense that if they do pay their taxes, as we all do, we every last one of us has always, paid the one,
That's
hand
right,
to
Corey.
God. um what you're doing is it's not just a matter of, hey, I tap down one extra land. No, you're limiting their ability to play other spells. And in Commander, it's not usually a game of I play one spell a turn and that's how I win. No, it's getting your board state to the point where you go, either I alpha strike somebody out of the game with a bunch of creatures, or I chain multiple spells together with effects, and that's how they pop off and win. It's very
Right.
rare that you just go, all right, I'm going to tap, blank, play my one card, I win, and that's it.
Absolutely. Um,
Uh, Now, if they do play that one card and go for the win, we're going to look at the final card that Cole and I have come to a humble agreement upon.
and it's also blue.
Cole, it is also blue, weirdly enough. Cole, what do we got?
So this is Fierce Guardianship. It's a free counter spell provided you control your commander. If you don't, it costs 3 and it counters target non-creature spell. This kind of goes against what's on the traditional Power 9 because it's a counter spell, but I think we're kind of paying homage to the fact that this is a free spell. It costs 0 mana and has a conversely pretty powerful effect to go along with that. Um,
Mhm.
Countering, a game-winning spell while having no mana like untapped is ask of a packet of negation, which has a much steeper price, in my opinion, than Fierce Guardianship, which can be completed. That term can be completed if you have, Rogue Rack in your command zone on turn 1 or any other, low drop commanders. Now, the higher your CMC your commander is, the less powerful Fierce Guardianship becomes because it's not going to be online until you're able to get your, say, Tox roll out. But the free, you just cannot go against the free.
I think if you look at this compared to Counterspell, right, which is the I think baseline that you can judge any counterspell against.
What does the namesake?
Th- yeah, the namesake, right? So yeah, this costs one more mana when you don't have your commander out, which is not the end of the world because there are a lot of 3 mana counterspells.
But counterspell counters
You still have
any
some.
spell. This only counters target
Sure,
non-creature spells. So I think it is a little bit. It's a little different. It's not just one more mana.
sure, but we play commander, and I would argue that what how much what percentage of the game do you think you would have your commander out? 70, 80, 90?
Provided you have a low CMC commander, I'd say that's true. If you have a higher CMC commander, probably 50 to 40 to 30% of the time.
Yeah, but even if you have a high CMC commander, like, I mean, I don't have this in, let's say, Miram. Like, Miram is probably one of my higher CMC commanders at 6. Now, I don't have this in that deck, but usually when you have a higher CMC commander, most deck builders, especially an experienced deck builder that would kind of have this card slotted in, I'd argue have ways to cheat their commander out, command beacons, or,
Well,
they've got
Command
a
Beacon
ramp
doesn't cheat it out; it
package.
just puts it in your hand.
Yeah, yeah, but what I'm saying is like you've got like ramp packages and things like that, or I mean, you could command beacon it to your hand, and then you Elvish Piper it, ba bam, right onto the field.
Well, here I'll tell you kind of an interesting life hack. This spell doesn't
A
say
life hack.
your commander; it says a commander. So you could, if you had
Oh,
a high CMC commander, like say you're playing Progenitus, you could cast a spell like Act of Treason and gain control of target. Provided you can pay Miriam's ward cost, you take control of
mhm.
Miriam, and now Fierce Guardianship's online that turn. So there's
so
ways you can
what?
kind of play around it.
So what I'm hearing is the deck I need to build needs to have blue in it so that I can run Fierce Guardianship and Act of Treason, and then I need to cherry pick my opponents to ensure that they have Rogue Rack in their command zone, just so I can steal
Right.
that 0 mana. Okay. Now let me ask you this because for me, so when I was making my list, this slot here, I knew first off, I knew Fierce Guardianship, love the card. I think for me personally, it's maybe the second. When I think of like counter spells,
Right.
this and Mana Drain are like the first two. I'm like check check. These are what I want. Um, Now when I was thinking of power level, I kind of flip flopped a little bit between Fierce Guardianship and Force of Will. So what for you? I think because I will spoiler alert. Force of Will is on didn't make the cut for either of us.
Well, so yeah, I'm looking at my, kind of my notes for this episode, and I did include in a category called free spells, Fierce
Mhm.
Guardianship, one other card that's on this list, and Force of Will. But I took Force of Will out because I just feel like it's not a card that you see as often. Fierce Guardianship was printed in a precon, so it has a little bit more accessibility, whereas Force of Will is, kind of gate kept by the price. It's also, a 5 mana spell if you're not able to meet the conditions. So I think overall, and obviously you have to discard a blue card to be able to cast that. So it just has some pretty strict conditions. Although it is a really strong, powerful free counter spell, I
Mhm.
think it's not as likely to be seen. And that's kind of what we were talking about earlier. Like maybe in a CEDH game,
Yeah.
it's just as strong, but and it is just as strong and casual. But if you're, you know, pulling straws on free counter spells, you're not going to be too goofed on for having Fierce Guardianship.
Yeah, and I think that's where I fell on it too. Was like if we were talking CEDH, Force of Will all day long is one of the most prevalent counter spells and popular spells in that format because CEDH is all about speed at the end of the day. The fact that it's you can get it for 0 mana is its own like godsend windfall, however you want to look at it. But I personally fell in love with Fierce Guardianship because my first precon was the precon it was printed in.
Ah,
So I got that Gavi the Nest Warden precon was like the very first precon, very first deck I ever bought getting to this. So having access to this spell from day one, I've really appreciated how powerful it was.
well, you're a lucky man because all those decks shot up in price as soon as everybody realized how strong that cycle of cards is.
Yeah, this one and the red one that has a
Ah,
dockside in it,
ah,
also
ah,
shoom,
ah. Okay, okay. I
way up
thought
in
you were gonna
price.
spoil a little further down the list. But
Now,
that
what I
concludes the 5 cards that we agreed on. So I'm interested to
uh-huh.
see what the rest of the cards are that we had some disagreements on.
Yeah, so and I'll tell you which one of them is. So Cole mentioned 0 mana spells further down the list. Uh so where we disagreed is he is a huge Obscuring Haze fan. Like just loves Obscuring Haze.
I've
Greatest
never
card
heard of that
ever.
card in my entire life.
Are you for real? You never heard of that card?
No.
Wait, without looking it up, what do you think it is? I'm just out of curiosity.
I'm guessing it's like a free white spell that like blinks something or makes it hexproof for one
Like
turn.
an ephemerate or something?
Yeah.
No. So this shows you how unbalanced this cycle of free spells are. Obscuring Haze is the green version in the cycle of Fierce Guardianship. It's 0 mana fog if you control your commander.
Wow, that's embarrassing, and it's $1.26 out here. So this is a pretty accessible
This is
card.
accessible fog. So it's what? How much is it? It's a dollar what?
It's I'm finding it here for $1.26, $5 shipping on that.
Over.
So
So it's a $1.26. Fierce Guardianship, $38. And Fierce Guardianship just got reprinted in Commander Masters, which is why it's $38, because it was hovering in like the $60-$70 range for
well,
a
and
couple years there.
take solace in that Obscuring Haze was also reprinted in Commander Masters with a really beautiful art of Azusa Lost but Seeking. So definitely check that out. Um,
Hmm.
and I think
And
it's
now you know a card. But with that being said, guys, so those are the 5 cards we agreed upon. We are going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to battle it out over the remaining 4 slots. We have 8 cards. Weirdly, there was no other card we agreed on, but I think we hit a couple similarities at least. We're going to duke it out. Let you guys decide who is the rightful king of the Power Nine when we get back from our break. All right, guys, thanks for hanging out with us through the break. We're talking Power 9 EDH edition. So we have gone through the 5 cards that Cole and I both agree on, but now it is up to you to listen to our quick arguments. We're gonna make short, concise arguments about why I'm right, and then you can get in the comments and tell Cole why he's wrong. So the
Boo.
first up, you boo. But the boos fuel me, sir. They fuel me. But first up, I present to you the best goblin pirate around. That is Dockside Extortionist. God, Dockside Extortionist. 1 and a red for a 1/2 goblin pirate. Whenever Dockside Extortionist enters the battlefield, create X treasure tokens, where X is the number of artifacts and enchantments your opponents control. That's right. You think paying the 1 is bad enough? How about when I make you count up every single artifact and enchantment on the board, and then I get rich off of it?
Well, hold on. It's not on the board. It's on your opponent's board. So
Even
I
better. Even
think
better.
Dockside Extortionist, although admittedly really strong, is kind of dependent on the quality of the decks that you're playing against. If you're playing against those Mana Crypt, Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Lightning Greaves, you're going to get 4 or 5 treasures. But if you're playing against
Uh-huh.
3 decks that can't afford $90, $100 or $1 in Soul Ring's case ramp, you're not going to get that much juice out of that squeeze.
Well, okay. Here. So you're attacking the quality of my opponent's decks. People in the comments, that is your decks he's attacking. He's attacking the decks of the dragons of the Urcast. So therefore, Cole is wrong.
Well,
I think with the prevalence of treasure, I think with the prevalence of Brothers War from last year, artifact decks, as long as Urza exists in my Magic the Gathering universe, my greedy little goblin pirate will thrive.
now, I think this goblin's going to thrive, and I'll tell you the reason why. It's because it sits in the same category as Fierce Guardianship, in that, like you said, it was printed in a precon. So this is a really powerful card that, if you were lucky enough to buy that precon while it was cheap, a lot of people have access to, and it's gotten reprinted
And
several times.
that's why it's $75. But
$75. I remember when it was only 10.
mm-hmm.
Now,
But
how
now
many decks is that
what
in?
pitiful so according to EDH Rec, which again we're gonna take with a little bit of pinch of EDH salt, isn't 18% of all valid decks, which tells you right there it's rock solid, because anything that has more than 18% is just it's showing off. Your counterpoint to this? What's the percentage of deck pray tell that your counterpoint card is?
Okay, so let's get into it. So you set these cards up against each other by putting a kind of comparison of them, but I think it's a really great comparison because we're both picking
Mhm.
cards that revolve around resource advantage, which sticks to one of our earlier categories. But I'll stop teasing you around. Mine is Smothering Tithe. What? A 4 mana enchantment that draws me or makes me treasures anytime an opponent draws a card unless they pay 2? How is that on my power 9? Well, it's because it's really, really strong. This is kind of a counter point to Rhystic Study as well, because it's going to create you a different mana, or a mana advantage when your opponents don't pay the tax. But it's
Mhm.
still a really powerful effect that's going to make you treasures at potentially a faster rate than Dockside Extortionist, depending on the quality of your opponent's decks. This is a
Yeah, I
card.
think it's very dependent on what your opponents want to do, right? So Smothering Tide's like, hey, if they're gonna draw a bunch of cards, you're living large. If you're in like blink a creature strategies, then Dockside is where your bread and butter is, I think.
Okay, that's a really great point because Dockside can be blinked often infinitely with Emil and any sort of blink engines to White Mane Lion. There's a ton of
Mhm.
different outlets for that are gonna potentially win you the game because it generates infinite mana really quickly. So I do concede that, but Smothering Tithe plus Windfall is the best trade deal of all time.
That's true. Now,
Uh,
if you go Windfall into Smothering Tithe, what's the optimal card number? So you said, hey, if I could count up 4 or 5 artifacts or enchantments, Dockside is like a beautiful card to play. If you Windfall the board and let's say everybody has no cards in hand and one person has one, that's not worth it. But what's the threshold where you're like, oh, I'm getting 5 or 6 or
Well, yeah, I mean, so for anybody who doesn't really realize here, windfall is you discard everybody discards their hand and then draws a number of cards equal to the highest number of cards discarded this way. So if somebody at the table has a reliquary tower and a heuristic study and they've gone up to 21 cards, you're going to be forcing everybody to draw 21 cards, and if they don't have 42 mana, you're going to be creating a lot of treasures that will help
who
you
doesn't have
cast those
42 mana
21
though?
cards that you just drew into. So this is a absurdly powerful combo, probably not as strong as Dockside loops, but I think Smothering Tithe being only $20 is much more likely to be at your casual EDH table, even if it wasn't printed in a precon. And it would stand to argue that 26% of decks that can have Smothering Tithe have it in there. And I personally feel like I see a lot more Smothering Tithes in my play groups than I do Dockside Extortionists.
Okay, so I'll give you 2 credits on this, right? Yes, you do see a lot more smothering. I see a lot more Smothering Tithe than Dockside Extortionist for sure. Also, and I have to concede this because if I didn't concede this point, it would be just be dishonest and deceitful of me.
Okay.
Whereas Dockside Extortionist is sloping down in the uglier factor as he gets reprinted with his art. Smothering Tithe has gotten better with art with age.
Very true. I love is that what printing is that has that gorgeous drawing of it's like a hand on a pile of gold.
Hmm. Double Masters, I
Oh
believe is that one.
man, that is a really fun Smothering Tithe.
Mhm. That's so Sharon has that in her Kyler deck. That's one I built that deck for Sharon, my wife, and I love that artwork. It's the one hand coming out. I mean, granted, the guy vomiting coins, which is the OG art, is pretty solid in and of itself. But I think Smothering Tithe is definitely like it's sloping up, whereas Dockside has gone from you look at the original art, little goblin with his little money coin purse. You go, yep, that's a Dockside Extortionist. Now the new one where he's like, I don't know, white mane monkey man or whatever that's supposed to
He's like
be.
Tarkir goblin. He's looking like a little yeti.
He's a letdown.
Yeah.
It's a letdown. Yeah, he's a little miniature yeti. So I will concede that point to you, but I think Dockside has the factor that it's on a stick, which means when your Smothering Tithe gets blown up, it's a little harder for you to bring it back. When my
Okay.
Dockside
Well,
gets blown up,
hey, I mean, okay, I think all I'll concede to you there is that although Smothering Tithe probably attracts more removal in general because Dockside
sure.
Extortionist is an ETB trigger, so it has to be done on the ETB. It's
Mhm.
also a creature, so it can't be countered by Fierce Guardianship, and so it does have like a
He's
little bit
more
of a
power so
protection.
he's more
But
powerful
it's
than one of the
also
Power 9.
100% more likely to be blown up in a creature-based board wipe, which are the most popular board wipes, or any sort of non-descript deal damage to each creature effect that is going to wipe your Dockside out. Of course, then you're maybe
Listen,
reanimating him, but Smothering Tithe, it's an enchantment, so it automatically has a bit of protection.
alright, oh, yeah, but here's how you really wanna look at it. When I play Dockside Extortionist, your Smothering Tide fuels my Dockside. Me bringing out Dockside when you have Smothering Tithe out does nothing for you.
All right, I'll
That's
give it
right.
to you there. Dockside wins. Now,
Yes.
we have okay, so this category was about kind of mana advantage with a lot of treasure tokens with both of our cards. But
Mhm.
the next set of cards that we both picked are equally similar in that they both generate card advantage. So I'll go first on this one.
Sure.
I'm the card that I chose is a card I hold really near to my heart. I love this card. It's Necropotence. It's 3 black. You skip your draw step, and whenever you discard a card, you exile that card instead. And you're going to pay 1 life as many times as you really need to, which might be 39 life in some circumstances. And you exile that many cards from the top of your library face down. You don't get to see them, but you put them back into your hand at the beginning of your next end step. And so then you do have to discard down to 7, but it's a way to essentially filter through the top 40 cards of your library or more if you have more life. And if you're not finding the win within those cards, you just need better cards.
Get good. Get good is your argument.
Right.
Um, okay. I see your Necropotence. And I raise you a Bolas's Citadel.
Whoa.
Bolas's Citadel is a legendary artifact. So you know it's already better because he just brought you a mere enchantment. I'm bringing the legend of Bolas. Uh, but for 3 and 3 black, so a total of 6, you're gonna get a legendary artifact. When you look at you may look at the top card of your library at any time.
Right.
You may play the top card of your library if you cast a spell this way from the top of your library. Uh, you pay life equal to the converted mana cost rather than pay its mana cost, and then you
Right.
can tap, sacrifice 10 non-land permanents, and each opponent loses 10 life.
Yeah, so these are both very similar cards. They both generate card advantage. Now, Necropotence, the downside of that is that you're skipping your draw step. You're losing life for this in the same way that you're losing life for Bolas' Citadel, but you get the cards at the
Sure.
end of your turn. Bolas' Citadel is really strong because you can kind of chain cards together, provided you have a little bit of top deck control, or you're just really lucky about not drawing a lot of lands. And then obviously it does have kind of an alternate win con stapled onto the bottom there, provided you have enough permanents to sacrifice. I can't argue with that. That is strong. It also has a pretty big difference in mana.
That's true. Now here, this is what I'll give you when we look at this, right? So the last set we were looking at is basically mana generation when they both did
Treasures.
treasures. This is more like card advantage generation, right? So I'll say Necropotence undoubtedly, if all things are equal, and let's say we're playing this at 40 life. If our life totals are the same and I play Bolas Citadel, you play Necropotence, Necropotence will dig you deeper into your deck. So you're gonna see more cards. The advantage to Bolas' Citadel is that you're getting those cards into play faster.
That's very true. Unless you're, talking about instant speed interaction, in which case Necropotence does still hold a pretty big, candle to Bolas' Citadel. I think being able to play, cards off the top of your library, especially like lands, if you can play 1 land each turn, it's really strong, but the burst draw of Necropotence is always going to put it in another level for me, because I'm a huge fan of just paying 20 life and dealing with the repercussions, because that 7 that you carve out of that 20 some odd cards that you draw is going to be vastly superior than whatever the random 5 cards that you Bolas' Citadel. Now, Bolas' Citadel though does have kind of synergy with any sort of tutor that brings a card to the top of the library, because it upgrades those. Yeah. So there's some relevancy there, and then with obviously it does combo with things like Aetherflux Reservoir and Sensei's Divining Top that allows you to kill everybody by gaining so much life that you can zap everybody for 50 life before you run out of cards in your library.
Let me ask you this. So what is the most amount, because I know you actually played Necropotence. What is the most amount of life you have ever spent into a necropotence in one burst? Because obviously you can do it like multiple, like, oh, I pay 2 life this turn and 4 life next turn, but in one just straight up burst.
Well, that's I'll tell you that I've played this. I play this currently in several decks of mine. I played in my Erebos deck that has no creatures, but it has a card in it called Vessel of Eternity, where I'm able to manipulate my life total and gain life equal to the number of counters that are on it, where the number of counters is what my initial life total is. So I've played some
Mm.
pretty crazy maneuvers of necropotencing for 30, 35, going down to 5 or less health, because I know on my upkeep it's all going to get restored. But in a game where I'm not kind of manipulating it like that, I think the highest I've ever gone is 30, leaving yourself at 10 HP. If you're confident
Mm.
enough, or if you're at enough in an advantage, that's all. If you can protect yourself for one turn, I'd love to take that risk. I'll go 30 any day.
Okay. Now, I think one other advantage to that I'll put a tally off my end as this being advantage. By the way, Bolas' Citadel's only $5. Which of all the cards we're looking at, not named Soul Ring, this is like by far the cheapest one.
Necropotence is 15, so it's 3 times that amount. So maybe Bolas' Citadel is a
Sure.
little bit more accessible. But can Bolas' Citadel, can you pay all your life and kill yourself on your own terms in a kind of a funny response when somebody swings at you for lethal damage? I didn't think so.
Yes, you can,
Well,
because I play instants off the top of my deck.
oh,
uh, yeah. Now, I think they both have their drawbacks, right? Like, depending on the deck you're looking to build. Like I said, Necropotence digs you a little deeper. Bolas' Citadel, I think, is better if you need, like, if you're running creature or artifact, like ETB style effects. I would probably lean more into the Citadel. If you want to get more just sheer cards in hand, like maybe you're running a spell slinger strategy or things like that, then go Necropotence.
I mean, Necropotence is also really facilitates a combo play style. If you have some good combos in
Mhm.
there where you just need to maybe burst into at least one of your pieces in a tutor, Necropotence is great for that. My only note is you got to take the original Ice Age art. It's a really beautiful card, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Although there are some really beautiful other printings. Now, Necropotence is only in 5% of all black decks, which does surprise me, but it shares this with Bolas Citadel. It has a pretty, heavy requirement into black. You need 3 black pips to cast
Mhm.
this. So some decks, might not be, it might be only splashing black, and they're a little bit afraid of being able to accumulate 3 black pips. So I do think that that's going to impact the percentage of play for Necropotence and for Bolas Citadel.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think these are both like mono black plays, right? Maybe I could see Necropotence in some kind of like Orzhov aristocrats kind of thing
I
where you
run
might
it in my
gain some
Scarab God,
life.
which is Demir. Because I
Yeah,
have
but
it's a primarily black deck that splashes blue,
mhm,
but you
yeah, and you're gaining life and gives you a little more access
absolutely.
to use. So we both agree, right? So Bolus' Citadel for the slot.
Oh, I think we're gonna have to agree to disagree on that one, Corey. But
Your blankness, like the way you just flatline there. I don't know if your soul left your body, like you fed into the necropotence, or you were just awash with, what was this guy saying?
I was afraid that Erebos heard me and was going to smite me in my sleep if I had said anything otherwise. So I think we got to go ahead and move on from this category before
Yeah.
somebody's knocking at my door.
So those two sets, I will say, had similar themes. They might not have gotten to the same place exactly, but they had similar themes in mana and card advantage, stuff like that. These last two pairings, polar opposites, I think. Like you like they just do different things. I won't even say they're polar opposites because they're just two disconnected cards. So I'm leading off with the best tutor in all of or all of Commander. I won't say all of Magic. I will say all of Commander, the most synonymous with EDH tutor. And that is Vampiric Tutor. For
Ooh.
1 black mana, you get a nice little instant. You can search your library for a card, then shuffle. You put it on top, and you lose 2 life. So you're guaranteed that your next card, barring somebody shuffling your deck away, is going to be that card.
So I got a question for you off the top. Do
Sure.
you consider it card advantage?
I No, I don't consider it card advantage. I consider it card selection, and I'll tell you why. So, card advantage would imply that that card is entering my hand in order for it to be neutral card advantage, right?
Because you're actually losing a card when you play the Vampiric Tutor. You're going down one.
Right, you're going down the Vampiric Tutor and ideally to go search for synergy pieces. Now, if you were to play like Demonic Tutor, for example, which is the 2 mana sorcery version, where you go out and you add it to your hand, then that would be a neutral card advantage situation. Just obviously you're paying the mana into it. The advantage to this here is one, you're getting instant speed, so you're probably playing it on the end step of the turn player ahead of you. Obviously, you don't have to reveal the card, which a lot of tutors force you to reveal. And you can search for anything. So you're literally, hey, here's the card, waving it face down, you're putting it on top of your deck. So it's not card advantage, but it is definitely like, hey, next turn, I'm going to get something I really need.
Yeah, so tutors come at all shapes and sizes. There are a lot of more expensive ones, but this is obviously pretty strong because it's 1 mana and it's at instant speed. Doing this on the end step before your turn, you set up your next draw for the measly price of 2 life. Now, I have seen it backfire because going to the top of your library often allows players who are playing Plarg and Nasari or something to take that thing that you tutor off the top, as well as
They
I play a
windfall
mill
you.
strategy. I love milling, and so I love nothing more than a mesmeric orb. Going on your turn and you untap, and oh, there goes that card you searched for. But I do think that it's really strong and it increases the consistency of your deck. This is not really a card in your library as much as it is every card in your library whenever you need it. It's not restricted. It could be a land if you needed it to. So I think
Well,
Vampiric Tutor is really versatile.
well, and that's the old adage to it, right? Which is our tutors are the best card in your deck. So because you're just getting anything you want. So turn one, you could go swamp, vampiric tutor, and then move that soul ring to the top of your deck for next turn if you wanted to.
And you would
Late game,
probably
it's
be
your win
wasting
con.
it. Yeah, because
Yeah.
typically you're going to want to use a Vampiric Tutor to get such a massive advantage that, because as soon as you're tutoring, everybody knows oh, they're looking for something. Are they looking for a combo piece or are they looking for protection? So you kind of start drawing some ire as soon as you Vampiric Tutor. Now,
Yeah. Now,
what you got?
I was gonna say what now that's the thing, right? So if you're in a bind, you could be searching for that board wipe. If you're in an aggressive point where you've got the advantage, you could be looking for your closer piece. That's why I think this right here, Power 9.
Now, you said that these cards are unrelated, but I'll tell you, they are very related because they're both instants. My second card, or in this category, is Deflecting Swat. Yeah, we talked about Fierce Guardianship earlier. It's a free spell that came in a precon. Big deal. Deflecting Swat is the exact same thing. It's 3 mana for an instant. It says if you control a commander, you may cast the spell without paying its mana cost. You may choose new targets for target spell or ability.
But it's no obscuring haze.
It's no obscuring haze, that's for sure, and it also is no obscuring haze in price. It's going to be $30, so it's about 15 times more expensive than your obscuring haze after shipping. But Deflecting Swat is a really powerful spell because it is similarly to a tutor, but in a different way, kind of a Swiss Army knife of removal. Not only can it kind of protect your own spells by using it on counter spells, but you can use it to redirect other people's beneficial abilities, their sign in bloods, and have yourself draw the three, or their ancestral recalls and have yourself draw the three cards.
Mhm.
You can do some pretty marvelous things with deflecting SWAT, and to have it be a free spell in mono red, I think that's already a color that if you're playing it by itself, maybe I'm not expecting too many responses. Obviously, there's Tybalt's trickery and a ton of removal, but for the most part, I think deflecting SWAT is a unexpected silver bullet that often saves games or protects your own game-winning spell.
Now, a funny thing is, you talked about using it to redirect Ancestral Recall.
Mm-hmm.
Now, based off of its old text, could you deflect it? Because the original text as Ancestral Recall says, draw 3 cards or force opponent to draw 3 cards. Now, it has been errata to say target player, but because this is target player, you could swing it towards
Bam.
yourself. But if they hadn't errated it, just based off of that, I think you could only have swatted it if somebody was like, player 1 said, I'm going to make player 2 draw 3 cards. You said, no, I want those 3 cards.
Yeah, we are lucky that Ancestral Recall has been reprinted in a million different, a million different editions, but mainly as like collectors cards that are technically unplayable, or just really expensive proxies, like the collector's edition that's $450. And
Yeah, so thankfully you can now, because of this errata, if somebody throws a $5,000 card on the table, you can deflecting swat it to yourself.
well, after you tell them that they're banned, they're banned from the play group, Corey.
Yeah,
Um,
no, I will say, yeah, you can use it offensively, but I think I see deflecting swat more in a defensive standpoint, where it's
right.
like almost swords to plowshares your creature, and you go, nope, you're gonna swords to plowshares that creature.
And go ahead and gain your own life, or use it on somebody else. I agree. It's a great, I mean, that just speaks more to the versatility of it. It's it's a protection spell, it's a defensive spell, it's an offensive spell. Nothing's funnier than redirecting a target player takes an extra turn, and I think I might be the target of that spell. You can catch people off guard, and there's a lot of like cute interactions here, with like aura enchantments, and you can fizzle somebody's fizzle abilities as well. So it's a very interesting spell. It's got a great art of a Stegosaurus by the name of Calamax. If you got the precon, you're lucky. If not, you rejoice because it was reprinted in Commander Masters. And Erica, actually my girlfriend, she actually pulled one of these after winning a Commander Masters draft, and it was a pretty
Very
sweet
nice.
pull.
We did a Commander Master draft and pulled Fierce Guardianship, ironically.
Well, to protect the world from devastation. It sounds like
Now,
this is a partnership dealing up.
when we were looking at Fierce Guardianship, we talked about, okay, where's it stand against like counterspell or something as its baseline. So where do you think deflecting SWAT stands against like swerve? The swerve or those kind of effects would be about the similar effect.
Well, I'd go with my favorite comparison is going to be Imp's Mischief, which is a black and
Mhm.
one for the same effect, but in black, and then you lose mana equal to or you lose life equal to the mana cost of the card that you're using it on.
Sure.
I mean, this card is going to scale directly with how expensive your commander is, mana wise. Because if you're playing a 5 CMC commander, you're now playing a 3 CMC redirect spell, which might not be worth it. But if you do have a low cost commander that you're going to be able to guarantee get out early or get it back out after getting it removed, deflecting SWAT is a lot more powerful. So it's a spell that it varies in power.
Mhm.
And it's only in
Yeah, I agree.
15% of all red decks, which I am surprised to see. But I think it's 15% for its price tag is pretty reasonable. It's a powerful card. It was printed on a precon. Love it. Yeah.
Yeah, and Calamax actually just got reprinted too in Ixalan.
Oh,
So
well,
there's that.
hopefully we'll start seeing a little bit more Calamax. Not just kidding.
Calamax was like a near miss on your Power 9 though, right? You were like Power 9 and also Calamax Power 10.
Yeah, yeah, right after the mem night, like no.
Alright, so I say Vampiric Tutor, you say Deflecting Swat. So we say Vampiric Tutor? Huh? Huh? Huh?
It's if Vampiric Tutor when paired with everything I think is way stronger, and I would say that putting a tutor in our Power 9 category feels appropriate. So I'm willing to
There
concede this
we
one to
go.
you. Yeah.
So now, we're joking about who's right, who's wrong, but I will say every card we've listed, and Cole, you can say the same for mine, maybe. Um, these are near misses for me, right? Like at the end of the day, you could make a Power 9 out of like maybe the top 25 cards and sit there and go, okay, well, which one drops off and which one just barely misses the cut. So when we're joking about these things, I don't think Smothering Tithe is not worthy of inclusion. I don't think Necropotence is not worthy of inclusion. These are all like, hey, if I had extended from 9 to 12 or 15 cards, you would see Smothering Tithe on my list. You would see Necropotence on my list. And I think the same might hold true for you for the ones I listed too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm looking at my list here, and I actually have a note at the top that says, cards I'm not talking about. And Dockside Extortionist is on that list, which that list
Uh,
is some pretty strong cards as well. And then obviously, like there were cards that were kind of competing for like our fast mana slots. Like I thought about Mana Vault. I'm sure you thought about Mana Vaults.
yep.
And there's some powerful cards here.
Now for our last pair up, and the reason I bring this up, so this was a concept that I wanted to do with Dylan when we first started the podcast. I was like, hey, we're gonna do Power 9. This would be a cool idea. And I sat down and exactly what I said. I wrote, okay, I'm gonna come up with 9. I came up with like 20,
Uh huh.
25, somewhere in there. Now, one of the first cards I jotted down on my list is your card for your final slot on the Power 9.
And I'm curious as to I find. I mean, you're obviously talking about Gaia's Cradle.
Temple of the False God. No. Yeah,
Oh,
Gaia's Cradle.
so yeah, this is I think this is a very strong card. It's not a card that you're going to see super often, but I think if you play against people who've been playing for a long time, you're more likely to see it. This is a card that was in a lot of my, college friends' decks, and so it's a card that I'm used to seeing. So maybe it was on my mind a little bit more. It's a land. It's a legendary land, and it taps for enough green to cast whatever you want because it's giving you enough green for each creature you control. So in the beginning of the game, this might not generate you any mana, but at a critical point of the game, this is going to generate you, 30, 20 to 30 mana. It is considerably more expensive than a lot of the cards on our list. It comes in at an average of $800. Um, so you're not as you shouldn't really worry about seeing this. You might see it as a proxy, but it is in a surprising 6% of all green decks. Now I don't know how true that is because at the end of the day, unless you're playing against people who have been playing for a long time, that 6%, those are some big spenders, that's for sure. But this card is
Well,
abusable. Yeah, it's abusable, and it's a lot of fun to play with.
what I think you might see more, because it just got reprinted Ixalan, is Growing Rights at Itlamok, which
Absolutely.
is basically Gaia's Cradle on a flip card. So the front card, I believe, has to do with counters, and then if you got so many counters, it flips to the
No, no, no,
back, and
no.
the
So
back is.
you look at the top 4 cards of your library. You get to put a creature
Uh-huh.
into your hand, or a land, I believe. And then once you have 4 more creatures at the beginning of your end step, you flip it and you get it the Cradle of the Sun, Itlamok,
Which is
which is
Gaia's Cradle.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
See, that We talked at the very beginning about like functional reprints. So this is one of those cards where it had a functional reprint in that sense.
Right.
Now, obviously, Growing Rights of Itlamok is good in the right kind of creature strategy deck, but just having it on a land is that much more powerful. It's
It's
less
your
likely to
land
be
drop.
interacted with.
Yeah.
You don't have to jump through hurdles to flip it.
But
And
admittedly,
this is our
growing rights of Itlamok is always going to do you something when you play it, because it's at the very least going to look at the top 4 cards of your library. Guy's Cradle, you might not cast a creature all game if you're missing out on land drops. So
mm,
I do see its weakness, but I think it's a really powerful land that facilitates extreme gameplay with anything that untaps permanents and Staff of Domination. You can do some crazy stuff.
mm. Now before we get to my choice for this pick, I do want to point out this is the only land card that made our list of even consideration. Was there any other lands you possibly thought of? Because I think if maybe not 25, but if we extend it to like top 50 and stuff, I think you'd have to get into the like Cabal coffers,
Y-
Urborg, Blood Moon
yeah.
maybe.
Well, Blood Moon is an enchantment. I do think it's really strong. There are some really strong lands for specific cases. Like Cabal Coffers, I think is strong, but it really requires you to have enough swamps to get the benefit of it. Otherwise, you're stuck in
Mm,
a situation like Gaia's Cradle, where you're not really generating any mana at all. But I think a really powerful land that I actually did consider is Bazaar of Baghdad,
okay.
which came out in Masters, and it doesn't tap for mana, but it's a land that taps and draws 2 cards, and then you discard 3 cards. So it's a little crazy to conceptualize, but you could do some pretty insane things with this card, and the ability to loot things into your graveyard, especially if you're playing like a Reanimator deck. Um, the card disadvantage there, because you are discarding 3 for the price of 2 cards that you're drawing. Um,
Mhm.
but I think it's I mean, for a land drop, it does a lot.
Yeah, I think Bazaar Baghdad is probably the next most powerful land. That and then probably like Library of Alexandria, but
Sure.
Library's banned and it falls into the same situation as the other Power 9, which is it's just expensive.
Yeah. That
Um,
is a common theme you see in these.
uh-huh. Now, my final pick is none other than another blue card because apparently blue and black are just going to be the theme of our set. And that's Expropriate. So
Okay.
Expropriate gives you a beautiful Council's Dilemma. So it's 7 blue blue for a sorcery, so it is a little pricey, but the payoff is massive. So starting with you, each player votes for time or money. For each time vote, take an extra turn after this one. For each money vote, you choose a permanent owned by the voter and gain control of it, and then you exile Expropriate.
Oh yeah.
This
This is
is
a
like
juicy card.
this is the like boogeyman of blue, right? You know how like green's got Craterhoof Behemoth is going to come in the game. White now has Moonshaker Cavalry or one, or something along those lines.
Uh-huh.
Blue, Expropriate.
Yeah, I think this it used to be a huge boogeyman. I mean, I remember playing maybe before there were more defined win cons, but Expropriate was absolutely massive. It was everybody was hoping to cast it or copy it, and those who were foolish and who had never played against it before are always voting time. Never vote time. Just give them a permanent. It's not that big of a deal. If you do time, we're losing the game. If you do, money, we're able to, all to band together and beat the crap out of the guy who cast Expropriate and get our stuff back. So I love Expropriate. I think I have a lot of fond memories with it. I have a copy of it. It's a fun card, um,
Mhm.
and I like the
Yeah,
dilemma.
and yeah, I mean, man, it's not really a dilemma, right? Because it's if you cast Expropriate, you're gonna vote time. Like, because what are you going to do? Give yourself your own permanent? So you're already guaranteed a second turn, which you'll probably need because you just spent 9 mana to cast this spell.
Right.
And then, when we talked about Ristic Study and all this stuff and paying your taxes and how that's a big theme, this is the ultimate pay your taxes card or something bad is going to happen to you. You know, like you said, just give, like, whatever your best permanent is what they're going to take. Just give them your
It's
permanent
not
because if they
worth
get,
2 extra turns in a row. Yeah.
yeah, and if for whatever bananas reason, everybody voted time and they just walked away with 4 extra turns off of this spell, you might as well go, all right, I vote time and now let me scoop up my deck.
Right. Now,
So
I love
that's
this card, but I gotta say, I think being that it's 9 mana, there are going to be a lot of games where you're not even able to cast Expropriate. So,
Mhm.
as far as games that you're going to be able to play Gaia's Cradle, if you're playing green, you're able to play Gaia's Cradle. So, I think that there's no contest here for where the slots going to.
as much as I think that expropriate is such a game ending, like, hand in glove with Commander, I do have to give you guys Cradle because, like I said, I personally, when I was making my own list, way back when this concept was like just in its infancy, Gaia's Cradle was like maybe the second card I wrote down after Soul Ring. So I do have to give you guys Cradle, even though I think
Woo!
Expropriate is just like I drop the atomic bomb on the table.
And while we're talking about how awesome Gaia's Cradle is and how I won, I also want to mention the kind of
Good try.
counterpart to Gaia's Cradle, Sarah's Sanctum, which is a white land
Mhm,
that taps and gives you white mana equal to the number of enchantments you control. Which I think
mhm.
comparatively is not as powerful because you're more likely to be putting down creatures. Usually, I do have an Enchantress deck that benefits from it, but Gaia's Cradle is going to be more consistent in that cycle just because pretty much every deck is running creatures in a grand mass. And I think it's easier to abuse with Gaia's Cradle because a lot of untapping effects are creatures.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think Sarah Sanctum is a great card in the right setup. Like if you're running Light Paws or something like that, then you're gonna just go ham with this. But yeah, Gaia's Cradle is going to be better because there's just more creature synergies, there's more creature based decks than there are enchantment specific synergies. But there you guys have it. I would say the definitive 9, but we do have some divergences. But that's where we are both at on our power 9 for commander. So we did at least narrow it down to 13 cards, and you guys can let us know about all the massive cards we whiffed on. Like if you want to tell us how, I don't know, Scoot Swarm should have been on here, then get in the comments. If you want to tell us how Avenger of Zendikar should have been on here, get in the comments. If
If
you
you want
want
to
to
tell
tell
us about
me
how
how,
Baleful Strix should have been on this list, please, join the club. I argued he wouldn't let
yeah,
me.
uh huh, you say that, but I love Baleful Strix. That's like I'm not gonna say it's my pet card, but that was one of my early pet cards getting back into the game. Uh, but that being said, let's get to question of the week, card of the week. Question of the week, Cole. Are you ready for this one? This
Hit me
comes
with
to
it,
us
Corey.
from the Chaotic Commander YouTube channel, hosted by John.
I know that guy.
The yeah, allegedly. What is your favorite card that is actually bad?
Yeah, so I'm a purveyor of awful garbage cards. I like cards that are old. There's a lot of overlap there. So my choice.
Old and garbage is overlap.
Now the art on this card is honestly better than the card itself. The card is Null Brooch. It's 4 mana for an artifact that allows you to pay 2 and tap it to discard your hand encounter target non-creature spell. Uh, that's a pretty steep price to counter a spell, and for that, I think this card is honestly pretty bad. But I'll tell you that I ran it a lot in mono red decks, mono green decks, any deck that needs protection or that can refill your hand quickly. Because sometimes having a counter on a stick, even though it's just a non-creature spell, or in a black deck, it's just unexpected, and it can seriously take the game to a different direction when you're willing to throw your hand in the trash to counter somebody's game-winning spell. Look at the art on that card and tell me you love it.
I do actually love it because it gives me big, like, Labyrinth vibes, like David Bowie, Jim Henson Labyrinth vibes.
Give away everything so others have nothing. I totally agree with you. To me, he looks like from the Dark Crystal. You got like Skeksis. He's got some dark energy to him. I wouldn't trust this guy with my life or with my brooch.
Yeah, this is if you I don't know what strategies would be in, but if you had some strategy that relied on you having nothing in your hand, then it's a great counterspell. It's two and a tap for a repeatable counterspell, which is, I mean, honestly better than counterspell at that point.
Well, you say that, but it can't counter creature spells.
Nothing can counter creatures.
And it is in a whopping 0% of decks on EDH Rec. And obviously there's so many decks on EDH Rec that it's just rounding down to 0. It says it's in 2,500 decks out of 3.25 million. So it's such a small number that it couldn't even be counted. So we're going with the 0% on this one. Yeah.
All right, I went for a newer card. This one's coming from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, and that is Instrument of the Bards.
Okay.
I don't think it's the worst card, but I do see its faults, and I do love it anyways. It's 1 green mana for a legendary artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may put a harmony counter on Instrument of the Bards. Then, for 3 a green and tap, you search your library for a creature card with mana value equal to the number of harmony counters on Instrument of the Bards, reveal it, and put it into your hand. If that card is legendary, you create a treasure token, then shuffle. So it's sort of a repeatable tutor, but it's a very slow tutor, unless you've got such a ridiculously low mana curve. I run it in Miram just as a way to kind of like search out dragons and put them in. It's got really cool art. It's a girl playing a harp in the woods surrounded by woodland creatures. You've got rabbits and boars and bears and lynx.
Oh
and,
my.
Yeah, house cats and the whole 9 yards. I think it surprisingly runs under the radar because it's so slow, because it has to wait to your upkeep. You have to have it on table for a full turn rotation to get to your first upkeep to put 1 counter on it.
But it's 1 mana,
Then,
Cory. It's 1 mana. So you're playing this turn 1.
You are playing it turn 1, but then I'm saying you gotta wait a whole turn rotation to then hopefully search your deck for something that costs 1 mana.
Well, and
so because it runs so slow, it's usually not target removal, so it kind of flies under the radar on the board.
But also, hear me out. So I'm actually going to say that this card's good. You're playing this turn 1. The activated ability costs 4 and tap to activate it. So you're not even going to be able to use this on turns 2 and 3. And unless you're not doing anything on turn 4, you might not even do it on turn 4. At which point you would have like 3 counters on it. And then it starts to get pretty relevant. I like that you can do it at instant speed, prior to your turn, at the price of like searching something smaller. Making a treasure token is kind of cool if you search out a legendary. So I think there's if you're playing a deck that has a lot of like legendary creatures, or kind of like a pod deck, a birthing pod deck where you have creatures at different mana values that have different uses. I think this is a really strong card, because anything that searches your library for something is a tutor. And even if it's slow, it is going to blow the house down when you start searching for those, Pathbreaker Ibexes, or like you said
I
earlier,
like that
Scoot Swarms.
you're defending my card that I said is my favorite card that's bad. I know it's good. I know it's good. The people at home don't know it's good.
You're right. You're right.
But yeah, I do actually include this in certain decks. Usually it goes Elvish Piper, Monster Manual, then this. But if you have something that needs like, I don't know, 4 or 5 kind of cheat mana effects, it's in there.
I mean, I have
Uh
a Marin deck that this would love to go into, so I might just slot it in. How many? What's the percentage of decks this is in, Corey?
Also 0.
Whoa!
Underrated card you should check out. But thank you, John, for that question of the week. Cole, card of the week. Oh my goodness, what am I looking at? This little hunk of man meat
Shield
you
your
presented us
eyes.
with.
Yeah, so I gotta confess to you, Corey, I am kind of a shill for secret layers. I love a good secret layer, and there was a pretty big reveal this week. We saw a lot of new secret layers, and I'm not suggesting that you go check them out. But if you
Oh, I'm
do,
already checking them out. Don't worry.
there is a Dr. Ian Malcolm foil edition, which has 5 cards, all featuring Jeff Goldblum as Ian Malcolm in Jurassic Park. And the card that I've chosen for our card of the week is Ian, the Convalescent Charmer, which is a modified Tassiger, the Golden Fang, and he's doing pretty much the exact same pose as Tassiger. He's shirtless. He's out of the movie. He's gleaming and glistening with oil, but he costs 6. He has Delve. He's a human shaman, and you can pay 4 mana, 2 colorless, and 2 hybrid blue green to mill 2 cards and then return an online card of an opponent's choice from your graveyard to your hand. He's a 4/5, and I'm gonna say it, he has abs.
He actually, it's funny, he is doing the exact pose of Tassiger, more or less. But I think he pulls it off better than Tassiger because Tassiger has like no tonal definition in the torso.
I gotta pull this up.
All right, we're gonna analyze various male body art, and then we're gonna determine.
All right,
I
I agree with
believe
you. It goes on the Power 9
exactly
now.
he is the power. Listen, the first 6 are his abs, right? And then we got power 8 and 9 in the pecs, or power 7 and 8 in the pecs, and then power 9 is clearly the smile. That's Smolder.
Yeah, I mean, it's a coy smile to be sure. I think another
The
interesting thing about this card is I don't know if there's any other cards that have like watches like that have leather wristbands. Like
Oh
that
yeah.
might be the first card in my watch tribal deck.
What is your watch tribal deck gonna be? Him as the commander, and then you have to get like various clocks or something. Oh,
99
midnight clock for
clones
this
and a
deck.
midnight clock. Unwinding clock. If it has hands and it's right twice a day, it's going in my
Oh.
a lot of these gnomes from Lost Caverns of Ixalan.
It's gonna be all gnomes, watches, clocks, and then after that you just go, all right, I've got 70 more card slots because nothing else features a watch. Time to put anything that has the word time in it. Time sieve, time twister, time.
I'm always on the lookout for a future ex Miss Malcolm. That's the
Yeah,
flavor text there.
it has a great flavor text. Also, this is the first time I've ever noticed that Tassiger has delve on it.
Oh yeah,
I don't
so
know.
that's been a huge part of it. It facilitates his mana cost being reduced as well as commander tax. So it pops off if you get a little bit of self mill going.
Now, if you're sitting at the table, right? Are you know how when people play certain commanders, you're like, all right, this is going to be a problem. This is going to be a threat. Do you feel more threatened if someone plays Tassiger or if someone plays Ian, like the Ian Malcolm Tassiger reskin?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's going to be so distracted that they're not going to notice that it's me playing Ian and I'm cheating with my Reliquary Tower and my Rhystic Study trick because they're just looking straight at those pecs. So I think I'm
I
a little
like
bit
that you
more
picked the
intimidated by
foil.
Ian.
I like you picked the foil because it gives like even more glisten. I think this might be one of those ones where the foil like vastly outsells the regular.
Oh, I sure hope so. Overall, it's a very funny secret lair, and I'm not suggesting that you go purchase it because it's an expensive piece of cardboard there. But I do think that it's very funny and at the very least worth taking a look at.
Yeah, I respect Magic's ability or their willingness to kind of push into these things because 100% this is like we're joking about it, but this is clearly like meme worthy secret lair work right here.
Agreed.
All right, guys. But I think that brings us to the end of today's episode. Let us know down below in the comments if you're watching this on YouTube, or let us know on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Twitter, or wherever. Let us know if our Power 9 was correct, incorrect, if you've got additions that you think we missed, all that good stuff. You can reach out to Cole directly at loveandmana.mtg. You can reach out to me at Sleevecard, or you can reach out to the podcast at UrCastPod or contact.urcast@gmail.com. Of course, if you're listening to the podcast right now, on whatever platform, do all those lovely things that everybody loves and supports and all that good stuff. So it's thumbs up, subscribes, 5 stars, whatever it is. If you guys are one of the batch that recently subscribed to us on YouTube, thank you very much, and feel free to check it out. If you're not on our YouTube channel, we are uploading a couple small videos. We actually just did one this week, tier listing all of Cole's decks from most problematic to how much Jeff Goldblum sex appeal can be packed into it. So check that
And the
out.
results will
But thank you
surprise
for
you.
making it into that. They will. Number 7 will shock you. Isn't that how they all go?
Yeah.
But thank you for making it into this episode. Hey, enjoy the rest of your holiday weekend. Have yourself some magical Friday, and we will see you next week.
Bye.